As the Mr Big of Sydney's underworld has been shot and killed in an ambush at his Bondi Junction home.
Why do we so often recognize danger only after it is too late? Why do words spoken as a joke or whispered in a fleeting moment of honesty reveal their true meaning only when the speaker has gone forever? These questions haunted the city of Higuay on February 13th, 2023. A date now etched into its collective memory. Hundreds of people gathered at the gates of the local school, their hands clutching white flowers, a symbol of innocence now intertwined with profound grief. On the wall above the gathering hung a photograph of one 5-year-old Esmeralda Ríchez, her smile radiant, frozen in time. Just a year earlier, Esmeralda had recorded a short video on TikTok, speaking without pretense, without even a hint of a smile, and predicting the date of her own death. At the time, nobody paid attention. Warnings, premonitions, subtle cries for help, these are rarely taken seriously. And yet, that phrase, spoken so casually, became a harrowing prophecy. People brought flowers not only to remember her, but to mourn the eerie accuracy of her words, a coincidence that twisted into what felt like fate, turning the life of a young girl into a tragedy shrouded in mystery. Her mother held her photograph, tears streaming down her face. Her father gripped her notebook, a lifeline to a child who was no longer there. On the surface, everything seemed calm, but the date itself had become a scar, a marker that could never be ignored. Esmeralda had known her own date of death, yet the warning in her words had gone unheard. This tragedy forces us to ask ourselves why we are so often blind to cries for help, and how we might learn to truly listen before it is too late. The Ríchez family lived in a modest house on the outskirts of Higuay, in the eastern part of the Dominican Republic. Their neighborhood was one of those rare places where people knew one another, where doors remained unlocked, and where children played outside until the sky darkened. Life was simple but rich in community. Elidio, the father, ran a small roadside stand selling fruits and snacks. Isabel, the mother, managed the home, ensuring her daughters grew up with respect and faith. The family's older daughter, Yurimar, attended university, while Esmeralda went to the local school. Sundays were reserved for church, evenings for family dinners and conversations about school, news, and dreams for the future. Respect, kindness, and honesty were the principles guiding their daily lives. Esmeralda herself was a bright, open child. Her smile was effortless, her energy infectious. Neighbors often described her as a joy to be around. She loved music and dreamed of one day becoming a model. On the surface, her life was ordinary, predictable, and secure. School, friends, family, but, as fate would have it, the ordinary would soon give way to unimaginable tragedy. Like most of her generation, Esmeralda's life revolved around her smartphone. Her free time was spent scrolling through TikTok, engaging with trends, and sharing videos with friends. Her room was a small studio, complete with a ring light, tripod, mirror, and a wardrobe for filming. TikTok was more than a hobby. It was her connection to the world, a place where she could be herself and, in turn, feel recognized. Unlike many who chased drama or shock value, Esmeralda's videos were simple dances, music, laughter. Her authenticity drew followers and admiration, giving her a sense of importance and belonging. Her parents allowed her this creative space, believing it harmless. Isabel sometimes encouraged her to focus more on schoolwork, but Esmeralda always promised she would, then returned to her screen. Her friends noticed her constant attachment to her phone. Even social gatherings were punctuated by checking notifications, editing clips, and choosing filters. Over time, posting became both a ritual and a test. Viewer responses brought excitement, but also anxiety, a cycle Esmeralda could not escape. At the end of 2022, a video appeared on Esmeralda's social media page that stood out starkly from the hundreds of posts she usually shared. Unlike the colorful clips of friends, dance challenges, or upbeat music snippets that had become her signature, this video was disturbingly minimalistic. There was no sound, no music, no laughter or antics, only a single line of text, stark against a black background. "They'll bring me flowers when I'm gone on February 13th. The post appeared late at night, around 11:47 p.m., and it carried no explanation, no emojis, no commentary, just that chilling sentence. Its abruptness was almost surreal. At first, it drew barely a flicker of attention, a handful of likes from followers who were unsure what to make of it, a few puzzled comments asking if it was a joke. In the endless, chaotic flood of content that social media platforms generate, it was easily lost, overlooked, and soon forgotten. For those scrolling mindlessly in the early hours of the present morning, it was just another video among countless others, unremarkable and fleeting. To those who knew Esmeralda, however, the post was startling in retrospect because it seemed so utterly out of character. Friends and classmates described her during that period as cheerful, confident, and energetic. She was planning new outfits, sketching ideas for music videos, and talking enthusiastically about her future in ways that suggested ambition, creativity, and hope. She laughed easily and engaged fully with her friends, both online and offline. There were no outward signs of depression, despair, or fear, no warning signals that one might expect when someone is contemplating the unthinkable. The young woman who had posted that short, cryptic message had otherwise been vibrant, focused on the future, and thoroughly immersed in the normal rhythms of teenage life. For teenagers, cryptic posts like this one were often part of the game, a fleeting joke, a flirtation with attention, or a way to sound mysterious to peers. Social media thrives on ambiguity, on teasing curiosity, on generating engagement through subtle provocation. A dark or unusual caption could be brushed off as sarcasm, irony, or an experimental attempt at self-expression. Many adolescents, intentionally or not, post content that is provocative without revealing anything of real consequence. In the moment, it is usually dismissed or misread, interpreted as a harmless stunt rather than a signal of distress. Yet in hindsight, the video was far from harmless. It was, in subtle but unmistakable ways, a signal, an early indicator that something profound and unspoken had begun to change in Esmeralda's life. Beneath the confident smile, the jokes, and the endless planning of outfits and music projects, there were currents that no one fully understood at the time. Something had shifted in her world, some internal struggle or external pressure that she did not share with her friends or family, some dark presence or thought that found expression in that single, unsettling line of text. The choice of words was chilling. "They'll bring me flowers when I'm gone." There was the suggestion of inevitability, the sense that someone or something outside herself would mark her absence. There was no mention of escape, no plea for help, no clear articulation of fear, but the phrasing was intimate and precise, almost literary in its morbid elegance. Then there was the date, February 13th, attached like a footnote of finality. To any reader, it was a timestamp, a marker, a countdown. The precision of it indicated planning, not impulsivity. It suggested that whatever she was alluding to was not random, not casual, and not fleeting. At the time, even close friends barely registered it. Social media is a place where odd statements are normalized, where cryptic, dramatic, or performative posts are routine. A line about going away could easily be interpreted as teenage melodrama, a joke, in bad taste, or a fleeting feeling of being misunderstood. Few paused to consider that a serious warning might be hiding in plain sight. Few suspected that the young woman behind the cheerful selfies and music videos was already facing forces that could alter her life in irreparable ways. The context surrounding the post, however, becomes meaningful when viewed against what would later unfold. The day, the tone, and the apparent incongruence with Esmeralda's outward personality all hinted at a duality, one public and vibrant, the other private and ominous. In a way, the post was a form of silent communication, a subconscious signal to the world, a veiled cry that only hindsight would reveal. It is an unsettling aspect of human behavior that those who are struggling internally often mask their distress with an outer persona of normality, even exuberance. Friends see only confidence and energy, while the inner narrative remains hidden, coded in small gestures, fleeting expressions, or cryptic online posts that appear insignificant at the time. For investigators, psychologists, and those who would later examine the case, this short video became a critical piece of the puzzle. It was evidence not of intent in a legal sense, but of a shift in state of mind, a first visible trace of the trajectory toward the events that would follow. Every detail, from the phrasing to the time of posting, was scrutinized for meaning. interpreted as a potential clue that could illuminate the deeper context of her life at the time. What seemed trivial to peers, the dark line on a screen, dismissed in the middle of scrolling, became a cornerstone for understanding the subtle prelude to a tragedy. In retrospect, the post was the first sign that the ordinary rhythms of Esmeralda's life had begun to fracture. Her outward appearance remained joyful and optimistic, but the cryptic message hinted at an underlying disturbance, a tension, or a sense of foreboding that was invisible to those around her. It illustrates the paradox of adolescent life in the digital age. The public persona and private reality are often starkly misaligned, and small digital breadcrumbs, dismissed in real time, can later reveal the earliest traces of danger, despair, or premeditation. That video, barely a minute long, would later be revisited countless times by friends, family, authorities, and journalists seeking to understand what led to the events of February 13th. A simple black screen with a single sentence became emblematic of the tension between visibility and invisibility, between a life outwardly full of promise and joy, and the private realities that remained hidden until it was too late. It is a haunting reminder that even in the most ordinary moments, the first signs of tragedy can appear in the smallest, most overlooked corners of daily life. John Kelly Martinez arrived at Higuay High School a year before the tragedy. At 35, he taught mathematics, quickly becoming one of the most respected and adored teachers. Unlike his colleagues, he took a relaxed approach, allowing students to call him by his first name, joke with him, and include him in school activities. His classroom was a safe space where understanding mattered more than memorization. Struggling students felt encouraged rather than judged. Parents praised his professionalism, admiring his dedication and approachable demeanor. Martinez's influence extended beyond class hours. He spent time tutoring students, discussing personal problems, and building trust. To many teenagers, he was more than a teacher, he was an ally. This trust, however, became a dangerous vulnerability. Over time, his attention towards certain students crossed professional boundaries. What began as guidance morphed into manipulation, cloaked in mentorship and care. Among those who trusted him completely was Esmeralda. For a girl seeking recognition and validation, Martinez's attention was intoxicating. It felt affirming. It felt safe. No one at school raised alarms. Teachers, staff, parents, and students alike saw his behavior as mentorship. Only later would the truth reveal a calculated abuse of trust. February 12, 2023, began like any other Sunday. Esmeralda helped her mother at their stand, worked on homework, and texted with friends. That evening, Martinez suggested a small outing to a local fair, inviting Esmeralda and a few classmates, along with his cousin. Isabel was hesitant, but Martinez assured her the trip would be short and safe. Eventually, she agreed, with the stipulation that Esmeralda return by 9 p.m. The plan quickly shifted. Martinez redirected the trip to Ma Beach, telling the girls the fair was canceled. No one informed Isabel. The car ride was filled with laughter, music, and the normal chatter of teens. Then Martinez stopped at a gas station, purchasing a plastic bag containing a bottle of beer and pills. No one questioned it. During the drive, Martinez invited Esmeralda to sit in the front. Once there, he poured her a drink and added unknown pills. Esmeralda, trusting the adult, drank it. Her energy faded. By the time they reached the beach, she was pale and weak. When her friends left to walk toward the water, Martinez kept Esmeralda behind. Darkness fell. The beach emptied. When the girls returned, Esmeralda was gone. Martinez claimed she was resting inside the car. The girls accepted this without question. Soon, Esmeralda's condition deteriorated. Her friends urged Martinez to seek help. He stopped briefly at a gas station where she tried to get to the restroom, leaving a trail of blood. Martinez forced her back into the car and drove to a pharmacy to buy medicine, pads, and emergency contraceptives, but never called medical professionals. He then bought clothes for her, covering the stains, all while ignoring her cries for help. By 11 p.m., the night had already settled into an uneasy quiet over the city of Higuay. The streets were dimly lit, the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a dog punctuating the stillness. Isabel and Esmeralda arrived home after the evening's activities, the car pulling slowly into the driveway, tires crunching over the gravel. Isabel had felt a mix of relief and frustration as she approached the house. Relief that her daughter had returned safely. Frustration because the day had been tense, filled with fleeting arguments and unspoken worries. She opened the door to see Esmeralda step inside, shoulders hunched slightly, her steps slow, and her face pale under the warm hallway light. "Hey," Isabel greeted gently, masking the worry creeping into her voice. "How are you feeling?" Esmeralda nodded faintly, murmuring something inaudible. She carried herself as if nothing was wrong, yet the subtle stiffness in her movements and the way she pressed a hand against her stomach spoke volumes. Isabel noticed, her maternal instincts alert, but before she could probe further, Esmeralda slipped past her and went to her room without another word. The house fell into a fragile silence. Isabel, still uneasy, glanced toward the hallway, catching the soft creak of Esmeralda's bedroom door closing. Something about the scene felt off, but she told herself it was probably temporary, a stomachache, fatigue, maybe just a normal teenage mood swing. She exchanged a quick look with her friend, who had accompanied them that evening. The friend, sensing Isabel's concern, leaned close and whispered, "She's probably fine. Give her some space." Both women hesitated but ultimately decided to respect Esmeralda's wishes, unaware that time was slipping away from them in a way they would later come to regret. Hours passed in quiet, the house seeming heavier with the absence of ordinary sounds, the laughter, the footsteps, the chatter of a teenage girl unwinding after a long day. Outside, the wind rustled through palm fronds, and the occasional honk of a late-night driver punctuated the night. Inside, only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a wall clock marked the passage of time. Dawn arrived with a sense of inevitability. The first pale light seeped through the curtains, casting the bedroom in muted gray. Isabel stirred from restless sleep, her mind returning to her daughter. She rose and walked down the hall, intending to wake Esmeralda, to see how she had slept, to offer a comforting smile or breakfast. What she encountered stopped her heart. Esmeralda was gone from her bed. The neatly arranged blankets were disturbed, twisted unnaturally, and the floor bore dark stains that immediately told a story of horror. Blood-soaked sheets and a towel left behind marked a scene too ghastly to process in the first moments. Isabel screamed, a sound raw with panic, grief, and disbelief. The scream reverberated through the small home, piercing the quiet morning. Elidio, waking to the commotion, rushed into the room, eyes wide with confusion and terror. Yurimar followed, drawn by the cry, dread already tightening in the pit of her stomach. The family stared at the scene, the reality crystallizing with unbearable clarity. Esmeralda had suffered, alone, in the dark hours of the night, her life cut short in a way that would haunt those who loved her forever. Medical professionals arrived, summoned urgently by neighbors and family, but the scene they encountered left little to be done. They moved quickly, assessing, documenting, attempting resuscitation with clinical detachment, but even their training could not reverse what had occurred. They confirmed the inevitable. Esmeralda had died from massive blood loss. The estimated time of death, between 3 and 4 a.m., was a haunting detail. The hours before dawn had been critical hours in which help might have saved her life, hours now irrevocably lost. The grief in the home was immediate and suffocating. Isabel crumpled to the floor, clutching what remained of her daughter's life in trembling arms, tears carving clean lines down her cheeks. Elidio, though younger, fought to maintain composure, his hands shaking as he processed the enormity of the loss. Yurimar hovered nearby, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and disbelief etched into her features. The silence that followed the initial scream was thick and suffocating, punctuated only by soft sobs, the sound of fabric brushing against the floor, and the faint, clinical noises of paramedics preparing to depart with a heavy report. News of the tragedy spread rapidly through the city of Higuay. By the time the sun rose fully, the streets were buzzing not with the normal rhythms of a Monday morning, but with panic, rumor, and disbelief. Social media became the first pulse of communal shock. Neighbors, classmates, and distant friends flooded timelines with posts of grief, disbelief, and calls for prayer. The local school, upon hearing the news, held a moment of silence that resonated far beyond the classroom. Teachers, Students and administrators alike struggled to comprehend how someone so young, so full of promise, could be taken so violently. Parents in the community grappled with the unimaginable, staring at their own children with renewed anxiety. How could a child who radiated life, energy, and enthusiasm be taken so abruptly? Friends, too, were left numb, replaying every interaction, every laugh, every shared secret in search of signs they might have missed. The tragedy did not exist in isolation. It rippled outward, shaking the foundations of a city that had thought itself safe, exposing vulnerabilities no one wanted to acknowledge. In the quiet corners of Higuay, the house where Esmeralda had lived now stood as a silent testament to the night's horrors. The sheets, the towel, the small details of the room carried a grim weight that would be remembered long after the initial shock faded. Investigators would later document every fragment, every piece of evidence, trying to piece together a narrative from the fragments left behind. But for those who loved her, no amount of reasoning or investigation could restore what had been lost. The city, the community, and the family were left to confront the void left by a life extinguished far too soon. As the day unfolded, the human response mingled with disbelief. Social media posts ranged from memorial tributes to stunned questions. Local authorities began the painstaking work of investigation, speaking with family, friends, and neighbors, trying to reconstruct the final hours. Yet even as reports circulated and theories began to take shape, the raw, emotional reality for Isabel, Elidio, and Yurimar remained unchanged. A child they cherished, a young life brimming with potential, had been taken, and the moments before her death could not be reclaimed. In the aftermath, Higuay struggled to reconcile normalcy with the trauma that had touched the community. The tragedy forced families to confront vulnerability, students to confront mortality, and neighbors to face a question that would echo indefinitely. How could something so violent and absolute happen in the quiet of the night, in a home that had always seemed safe, to a young girl whose energy and spirit seemed invincible? The questions hung over the city like a shadow, unanswered and unrelenting, marking the beginning of a grief that would linger far beyond the initial horror. Initial police reports suggested illness or complications. Rumors swirled. Friends' testimonies and gas station surveillance would later reveal the chilling truth. Martinez had given her alcohol mixed with pills, ignored her worsening condition, and actively prevented medical intervention. Evidence from his car corroborated the abuse. DNA matched Esmeralda's, confirming he had physically harmed her. Most damning was an audio recording recovered from her phone. Between 3 and 4 a.m., a faint, trembling voice could be heard. "I'm dying. Tell them." The recording, played in court, silenced the room. It became undeniable proof that Martinez left a child to die. The trial began months later, the halls of the courthouse in Durango thrumming with a tension that seemed almost tangible. Outside, news crews clustered along the sidewalks, cameras trained on the courthouse entrance, microphones poised to capture every whispered comment from spectators and family members. The public's attention was immense, a tidal wave of curiosity, outrage, and grief that poured into every corner of the city. Social media amplified the scrutiny, with hashtags and commentary tracking every motion, every testimony, every legal maneuver. The story of Paloma Nicole Arlano Escobedo's death had become more than a local tragedy. It was a public reckoning, a cautionary tale about the vulnerability of children, the fragility of trust, and the consequences of negligence, both social and institutional. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation and tension. Spectators packed the benches, their faces taut with emotion. Some were members of the local community who had followed the case closely. Others were friends and family, their grief made visible in the set of their shoulders and the glistening moisture in their eyes. School administrators attended as observers, acutely aware of the broader implications of the case for student safety and community trust. Photographers and journalists jockeyed for vantage points, capturing every angle of the proceedings, while court officers maintained order, the subtle hum of their presence underscoring the seriousness of the events unfolding. At the center of the proceedings stood the defendant, Martinez. His posture was defensive yet calculated, a mix of arrogance and anxiety flickering across his features. He had attempted to present a public image of innocence, but the mounting evidence suggested a far more sinister reality. From the outset, his defense counsel claimed the death had been a tragic accident, a momentary lapse, a misjudgment that had spiraled out of control. They argued that there was no intent, that any aggressive actions had been unintentional, and that Martinez's presence in Paloma's life had been misunderstood. But the evidence painted a starkly different picture. Witness testimonies recounted troubling interactions leading up to the tragedy, describing a pattern of coercion, manipulation, and aggression toward Paloma. Forensic reports and medical examinations confirmed the severity and nature of the injuries she had sustained, injuries inconsistent with any claim of accident. Digital evidence from communications, social media, and messages provided further context, demonstrating a troubling imbalance of power, influence, and control. In every detail, from the physical evidence to the witness statements, the narrative of intentional misconduct became increasingly undeniable. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a theater of emotion and fact. Family members provided testimony, their voices trembling yet resolute, painting a portrait of Paloma not only as a child of gentle character and intelligence, but also as someone whose trust had been exploited and ultimately betrayed. Teachers and peers described her diligence, politeness, and care for others, qualities that made her beloved yet, tragically, vulnerable. Psychologists and social workers explained the subtle pressures and family dynamics that may have contributed to her susceptibility to manipulation, creating a fuller understanding of the context in which her death occurred. Martinez's demeanor shifted as the case unfolded. Attempts to downplay his role faltered in the face of incontrovertible evidence. The jury, attentive and deliberate, weighed every testimony, every document, every piece of digital and forensic proof. The defense's narrative of accident was dismantled piece by piece, replaced with a clear, harrowing story of misconduct leading directly to Paloma's death. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as the facts became undeniable. This had not been a tragic lapse or a momentary misjudgment. It had been the result of aggressive behavior toward a minor, behavior that had escalated and culminated in the loss of an innocent life. Finally, after weeks of deliberation and testimony, the jury returned a verdict. The words were both a relief and a hammer. Martinez was guilty of aggressive misconduct toward a minor, resulting in death. The sentencing was pronounced with solemn gravity: 20 years in a correctional facility, alongside a legal mandate to compensate Paloma's family for their immeasurable loss. Justice, in the legal sense, had been served. Yet as the sentence echoed through the courtroom, it became painfully clear that no ruling, no number of years, no financial restitution could replace what had been lost. For the Ríchez family, the verdict was a bittersweet moment. They felt relief that the courts had recognized the truth, that the person responsible for their daughter's death had been held accountable. But that relief was inextricably bound to grief.